Hey guys, are you ready to transform your mind so you can transform your life? Coach Mirna brings you one-on-one coaching and expert guests weekly to help you to grow. Because happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Looking for personal growth? Let's do it.
What plant-based diet is mostly likely to meet your nutrition needs as closely as possible to if you were on a carnivore diet?
Oh my gosh, such a good. I took notes of things I needed to say on this show just to like answer some of these questions. So I'm gonna keep it hopefully on track with your question.
Okay, that's okay.
So you nailed it. The question is not plant-based versus meat. It's not plants versus meat. I don't think that's not the right conversation. The conversation we should be having is being more plant forward instead of meat forward. Meat can play a really wonderful role, and actually so to answer your question straight on the one you just asked about, which diet is best? Mm-hmm. The best diet is the longevity diet, and which its close sister is the Mediterranean diet.
Isn't that the sweetest sound? That's the sound of another sale or another dollar hitting your Shopify e-commerce store. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Sign up for $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/transform, all lowercase. Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Melanie Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Melanie Murphy Richter, MS, RDN, and registered dietitian. And Melanie and I are going to be talking on the topic today: can plant-based nutrition promote longevity and expand your health span? You notice I didn't say lifespan, because now we just don't want to grow older. We also want to be healthy as we grow older. So diet and nutrition is very important to get us there. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you, Myrna.
You're very welcome. Happy to have this conversation. All right. So let me give you guys a brief introduction. Melanie Murphy Richter, MS, RDN, is a dynamic registered dietitian, nutritionist, and the 2023 Recognized Young Dietitian of the Year. What an honor. By the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. As Director of Communication and Medical Science Educator at Nutra, she drives the company's mission to promote health through evidence-based nutrition. Melanie is also a graduate instructor at UC Irvine, where she mentors future healthcare professionals. She's the founder of Holistic Ritual. She combines science-based nutrition with holistic healing. She has been featured in Forbes, USA Today, Men's Health, and now the Transform Your Mind podcast.
Yay.
All right. Well, normally I start off the questions by setting the table and finding out how you got to be a dietitian. But because we have a lot to cover, I'm going to go straight to the meat and potatoes. So my first question is, I've been doing this for a while. I've read many books. At one point in time, I thought that, I was thinking that plant-based nutrition is the best. And then someone will come on the show and they're saying that, no, it's not. So let's talk about that right off the bat. There's a lot of conflicting information about the difference between plant-based nutrition versus the carnivore diet. What are the key mechanisms by which plant-based nutrition influences our health span, like I started off with?
Yes, this is getting right into the meat and potatoes. Yes, so there is so much conflicting information, and a lot of I always like to preface the fact that a lot of these conversations too are very emotionally charged. A lot of people have, very big emotional attachments to the types of diet and lifestyle that they particularly lead, whether that be environmentally or from, their fitness routine or whatever it may be. So I do think it's important when you sit down to have these conversations that you understand what your specific goals are as an individual. Is it that you want to live till you're 90, or is it that you want to be in a body that is svelte and super fit? Like what exactly are your goals? Because I think that's a important way to start to really understand what's going to work best for you. But in terms of the mechanisms, there's a lot of really very interesting, fascinating data that's come out in the last 7 years, even about basically showing that the types of it really does come down to fiber, protein, and healthy fats, predominantly when it comes to plant-based eating. So most of the longevity zones around the world, some people know them as blue zones. We call them longevity sites here at Nutra, which is where a longevity science company that I work at. All of them follow a predominantly plant-based food pattern. So the reason most of this research even started being developed is like, okay, who is living the longest and what are they doing? Most of them follow a mostly plant-based diet that's high in poly and monounsaturated fats, really high in plant-based proteins, like from legumes and beans and nuts and seeds, and also really high in fiber. So things also from legumes, but also from whole grains and fruits and vegetables and things like that. But when it comes down to, I think usually the plant-based conversation comes down to the protein specifically. Correct me I don't know if this is where your mind is going, but usually it's the carnivore versus plant-based diet. It's like one or the other. And what we have been finding in our research is most people, not most people, when our cells consume a protein or amino acids from a legume versus a chicken, for instance, there is less activation of what we call nutrient sensing nutrient sensing pathways. There are 3 specifically: mTOR, PKA, and IGF-1 that I think most people would probably be most familiar with IGF-1. But when those nutrient sensing pathways are triggered, which happens predominantly with animal-based proteins, it actually accelerates the age of our cells. So when you talked about the beginning of the show, the difference between health span and lifespan, the difference between the two is one's your chronological age, lifespan is your chronological age, and health span is the age of your cells. We want our cells to be young. When our cells are acting and functioning younger than our chronological age, we will feel younger than our chronological age. Our health, our ability to hike and move and play with our kids well into our 90s, that's a result of our cellular age, right? And plant-based proteins don't activate those nutrient sensing pathways nearly as high as animal-based proteins will, which is one of the main reasons why plant-based diets are superior for health span specifically. Not to mention, plant-based diets, especially if you do them well. I mean, there is a caveat here that lots of people don't necessarily follow plant-based diets well. If you have a well-balanced whole foods-based plant diet, you're also getting a lot of fiber, and fiber helps to counteract, not only is it great for our gut health and, keeping our bowel movements in check and making our microbiome diverse and rich and healthy so we can really break down our foods well, but also it's wonderful for, helping with heart health, reducing LDL levels, making sure that we have, really a well-functioning digestive tract. So I would say I don't know if that opened up a Pandora's box, but I would say that there's a lot of science to back up plant-based diets. And I'll stop there for a second, see if any of that spawned.
Right. Well, which is basically, that's a foundation for excellent, great conversation. And the reason, now I have always felt personally that a plant-based diet is best for you. I've tried to go to maybe 3 times a week or so, not eating meat, because I was under the impression that we should all strive to go to a plant-based diet or include most of it, right? And maybe eat a small piece of chicken or fish or whatever. And I stopped eating red meat a long time ago because I understand that there's a lot of challenges with that. And then to submit that, I had a friend of mine that I was having lunch with maybe 5 years ago or so. And she shared her story with me, how she had all this inflammation in her body and everything was hurting. And now she is plant-based and all the pains have gone away. So I heard that. So I was actually quite surprised a couple of months ago when I was interviewing someone on the show and they started talking about brain health and all these different things. And I assumed that she was saying that, all right, you need to eat plant-based. And then she says, no, that with a plant-based diet, you're not getting a lot of the nutrients that you need for brain health and all. And that's why I started off with the conflicting information, because there's one school that's saying that, you need the proteins and you need the stuff from the animals and the things that you can get from meat, you can't get from plants. And then, I started eating legumes, and then somebody came on the show and said, oh, legumes is going to get you fat because it's all kinds of carbs. So you said something very important. It's, you're laughing, right? Yeah. And you said something very important is that you've got to follow it well. So, I mean, you can't, and then personal experience, I have an uncle that has been a vegetarian for, now he's in the 70s. He must have been a vegetarian for at least 40 years. And then I was quite surprised, and he's got all kinds of health issues, huge diabetic and cancer in his body and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, why is it but this beautiful diet is not healthy? So you're right. I mean, of course, he was probably eating rice and potatoes and all that. So my next question is, what plant-based diet is mostly likely to meet your nutrition needs as closely as possible to if you were on a carnivore diet?
Oh my gosh, such a good. I took notes of things I needed to say on this show just to like answer some of these questions. So I'm gonna keep it hopefully on track with your question.
Okay, that's okay.
So you nailed it. The question is not plant-based versus meat. It's not plants versus meat. I don't think that's not the right conversation. The conversation we should be having is being more plant forward instead of meat forward.
Right.
Meat can play a really wonderful role, and actually so to answer your question straight on the one you just asked about, which diet is best?
Mm-hmm.
The best diet is the longevity diet, and which its close sister is the Mediterranean diet. That includes mostly plants. So when you look at your plate every night, every meal, and you see, is half of your plate fruits and vegetables or whole grains? Great. If the other fourth is a little bit of fish or a little bit of meat and, maybe some, if you eat dairy or cheese, great. But the bulk of your plate should be plants, and a side dish should be fish or meat occasionally. Not all, it doesn't even have to be all the time. So I think it's mostly a mindset shift, because we're coming from a society where meat is, if we sit down with a plate of chicken and maybe a little side dish of carrots, that's a meal to us, right? It should, the meat should be a supplement, it should be a side dish, and it shouldn't be the main focus of your plate. I think that's a better conversation, because you're right. The people who talk about, meat has a place in a healthy plant forward diet, but it shouldn't be the main focus, and it certainly doesn't even need to be eaten every day. And the element of our Western societies are very, very high in the reason we have so much, one of the reasons we have so much inflammation in our current society too, is the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Omega-6 and omega-3 are both really important to our diet, but omega-6, which is found primarily in like seed oils and things like that are very high in processed foods, that are used in processed foods. When we have too much omega-6 and too little omega-3, inflammation happens. We need to switch the ratio. So we have more omega-3, less omega-6, so that we have less inflammation. That's why we emphasize things like nuts and seeds that are high in omega-3. We highlight, fish, fatty fish like salmons and trouts that are high in omega-3, sardines, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But it's really about, can you include more plants? Because also the Western diet, as you kind of alluded to with your uncle, you could be following a vegetarian diet for, environmental reasons, right? And still be eating, mac and cheese, Rice Krispies, all of these vegan foods that are
I don't.
of meat, but they're really still ultra processed, right?
Right.
You could be a terrible vegan that way, or a terrible vegetarian. Not getting enough protein as a vegan is also not going to be healthy for your body long term. So it's about balance in either direction, but the balance should always tip more towards plants and less around the massive focal point of meat that we have been, our society has currently been, that we're currently in.
I've been an entrepreneur since the early 90s, even winning the Entrepreneur of the Year award. But when I first thought of starting my business, I had the passion and the vision, but zero clue where to start when it came to selling online. This is where Shopify can help. Shopify helps you set up your digital storefront. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Mattel and Drew House to brands just getting started. Whether you're selling physical products, digital downloads, or services, Shopify has everything you need to launch, manage, and scale your business. Shopify is also packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify helps you transform your business with expertise in everything from managing inventory to processing returns. So, if you're ready to sell, you're ready to Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/transform. Go to shopify.com/transform.
Okay, so that's great, which is basically what I've heard. And I love the word that you said, plant forward, because yes, I'm aware of it. And, I have a West Indian diet, which is a lot of vegetables and plant-based with a little bit of meat, which is I think it's comparable to the Mediterranean diet. And a lot of times, I would just eat like pumpkins and okras and things like that, which is part of our main diet. And have a little bit of shrimp or something in it. But a lot of times I would do that. And basically that is because I want to be more plant forward and, mixed vegetables, and I eat a very little bit of meat. But all right, so I was assuming that the conversation would be all plant-based, but I like what you said. It's not all plant-based, it's plant forward. And a couple of times a week, maybe you're going to have a fish and meat or something to get the nutrients that you're missing with all the plants. So
Yeah.
Is that what I'm understanding you're saying?
You are understanding it right. Yes. And you don't have to. You could be a really well-balanced vegan without any meat. The idea that you won't have as good of brain health or, by avoiding it altogether, that I don't agree with that at all. Maybe if you were following that diet, I was just saying the vegetarian that's still eating mac and cheese and Rice Krispie treats, sure, that would probably not be great for your brain health. But if you're eating, if you're eating soaked legumes and eating nuts and seeds and getting a lot of really wonderful, even tofu and tempeh and all of these other really wonderful vegan vegetarian foods, you're going to be doing really well, likely with your brain health too. But from the longevity diet specifically, which is Dr. Walter Longo's, who's one of the main the leading scientists in longevity and light and health span, is very it's moderate protein. So ideally from plant-based sources, but with complementary fish, ideally fish a couple times a week if you want to include some chickens and meats, a couple times a month. That fits into the diet, but it's mostly from legumes, seeds, not, all of those types of really wonderful plant-based proteins. Very high in mono and polyunsaturated fats, and decently high in complex fiber-rich carbohydrates. So things like quinoa and brown rice and amaranth and all of these really wonderful whole grains that have lots of vitamin B vitamins in them and other types of minerals that are really healthy for an overall diet. So yes, I would say plant forward most of the time, but fish and meat can play a role as a supplementary.
Well, yeah. Well, the vegans are like totally anti stuff. So, a lot of them would not like my uncle would not even touch fish. I mean, I'm not even sure if he eats eggs, but you're right. But, when they have this opinion of that's bad for the environment or that's bad for the animals or whatever mentality, that they're vegan, they don't touch that stuff. They don't touch eggs, they don't touch milk, they don't touch, so right now, like I said, my uncle is have a lot of health issues, and I'm trying to tell his wife that she should make him some smoothies or something because he needs the protein. But anyway, yes. So that's great. So let's circle back on, when I said that I was eating a lot of legumes and getting fat, and someone on the show said because that's all carbohydrates. So you believe this as well?
No, oh man, this is a conversation so near and dear to my heart. Carbohydrates are not all bad. I think that we also are coming off of this, I'm glad that these conversations are being had, because the keto diet, for instance, was originally, which is a very, very high fat diet, and moderate protein, low carbohydrate diet, was originally developed for people with epilepsy that's a brain related neurological condition, helped to reduce the amount of seizures in epileptic patients, because of the short chain, medium chain fatty acids being able to bypass the blood brain barrier to get to nutrient. That's kind of where that conversation that you were hearing before about keto diets being really helpful for that, I think. But it's not, I think, because of the advent of these kind of trending diets that are rooted in kernels of really important truth, and then they kind of get blown out of proportion. Now everyone's don't eat any carbohydrates. They're terrible for you. You're going to get fat. It's not true. It's simply not true. And in fact, it's a really poor decision to do that, because really whole grains, fruits, these are all incredibly, first of all, they're our main source of fiber. It comes from carbohydrate rich food sources. So excluding all carbohydrates or supplementing with synthetic forms of fiber, simply not as good as eating fiber from the source. But also the carbohydrate category is so vast, and in Western cultures, we are eating a ton of carbohydrates, but it's not carbohydrates from quinoa, whole grains, and amaranth or whatever. It's actually from added sugar in processed foods. So if you are, legumes are a very high carbohydrate, natural form of carbohydrates, also very high in protein, by the way. If you ate, 4,000 calories worth of legumes in a day, yeah, you're going to gain weight.
Fat, right.
You're going to gain weight from eating 4,000 calories. If you're a five woman and eating, and you don't, aren't a competitive runner and you're eating 4,000 calories a day and increasing your calorie in, of course you're going to gain some weight. That's math, it's science. But it's not likely if you're having legumes at a dinner versus having, another plant-based source of carbohydrates or protein. It's not likely to have that happen. But the low carb conversation that I think is kind of rooted in what your question is, it's the reason people have seen such benefit from it is because when you say I'm going low carb, you realize suddenly when you go to the grocery store that all the processed foods that you were having before are very high carb. And you naturally, when you're following a diet like this, you're removing a lot of these ultra processed foods from your diet and you're grabbing more whole foods. But it's actually not the carbs that are doing that. The good carbs that are doing that, usually it's the added sugar in the processed foods that you're eating are causing that problem.
Okay. Well, that's good. Now, I don't eat a lot of processed carbs, but part of our Caribbean diet is we eat rice with peas. Like, we put like kidney beans, things like that. And that's what I was doing. And I don't know. But anyway, she says, well, yeah, you're carb loading. And that, so now I really have, I've started it back now again because, my health coach was telling me I need to have, right. He's put me back on it. So now I'm eating it again because now I'm not, he's telling me I need to increase my my calories per day. That's why I put it back in.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, at the time when I was trying to reduce it, my guest said, yeah, you're carb loading. No wonder you can't lose the weight. Because I didn't even realize that they're always saying that beans are supposed to be so good for you and it's got all the proteins and all that. I didn't even realize it was full of,
Lots of
had a lot of carbs in it.
Sure.
And it's called, sure mentioned it.
And there, you bring up a good point that there is, we're also, because of the way that the last couple decades have, and by couple, I mean 50 decades easily, we never had type 2 diabetes before the low fat revolution that happened in like the 1950s ish. We had, and this actually, I don't know if you'll find this interesting, but I love telling this history story. In the early 1900s, when we were definitely settling in societies. We actually started, farming more. We had farm animals. We were eating. So a lot of people were eating more meat for the first time ever in human evolution in the early 1900s. And they found in like in the 1940s, 1950s that a lot of people were dying of heart attacks. And they were like, wait, all of a sudden, this wasn't something that was happening before either. And it, spawned, all this research and questioning. And what they found was that fat was causing the heart attacks.
Yeah.
Problem is, at the time, no one was differentiating the types of fat. So if you're eating a lot of animal sources of protein, it has a lot of saturated and trans fats in it, right? So they didn't say, it's saturated in trans fats that are causing the problem. They just said fat is bad.
That's right.
And you probably know well, I very well remember growing up that low fat was everything. So, all the companies were trying to adhere to, no one's eating fat because everyone's demonized fat. So everyone's low fat yogurts, low fat milks, low fat this, low fat that. And fat was just removed from everything.
Yeah. And then until the diets came around and said that fat, no carbs. I think.
So here's the Myrna. What happens when you remove fat? Fat is what makes food taste good.
Yeah.
So if you remove fat from a food, and you're a food manufacturer somewhere, and you're trying to adhere to what the trends are telling you, what do you do instead of when you take the fat out? What do you do to make your food palatable?
You
add sugar.
Drop in it, right?
You add sugar. Because sugar is technically, when you put it in a food, it's technically low fat. But what happens when you eat too much sugar, which is most Americans are eating about 5 times the amount of added sugar a day that is recommended for a healthy life. Right. If you eat, and by the way, added sugar has negative health benefits for you.
Right.
It's just calories. And the more that you eat added sugar, it will get stored on your body as fat. So sugar can also, when you're not using it, get stored on your body as fat. So what we're seeing now is the aftermath of the low fat craze, where you weren't getting enough sets. You're eating now. Now we're eating processed foods still that still are with added sugar because it's so delicious to get that, sugar is very addicting. So anyway,
And the food manufacturers are getting away with all kinds of labeling. Um, they're doing things with labeling stuff so that you can understand what's in it. My daughter goes and she reads labels. I don't even read labels, but she's there reading labels. And, I've seen people in the grocery store spending like 15 minutes reading labels. And I'm thinking, it's a consumer. You know what I mean? So that's great. All right. So now, again, I just mentioned, I had the weight loss journey. And one of the things that I did on the weight loss journey, of course, I interviewed a whole bunch of people on the show, but intermittent fasting, and I tried intermittent fasting. And then I came across your products where you have a Nutra or Prolong has a 7-day fast where you're eating foods, you're eating soups and energy bars and things like that. But you're eating, but it is not, for some reason, it's not going towards the calorie thing and it's considered fasting. So can you explain the benefits or the impact of fasting mimicking diets on the cellular regeneration and aging? Because that is basically the science of your company and what it does. So
yes,
let's talk about that.
Great question. So it's 5 days actually, not 7. But I'll get to that in a second. Yeah. So going back to those longevity zones that we talked about earlier, in the research of longevity zones, blue zones, we also, outside of plant forward eating and plant forward diets, we also noticed a trend that most of them followed a version of a prolonged fast at some point or several times during their year, usually for religious reasons. But that was really interesting when researchers realized, like, oh, they're abstaining from food for several day periods at a time, several times a year. What's happening there? Like, is there something to explore there? So what we have found over the years is that fasting, meaning when you avoid food, and essentially drink water, especially when you do it for 3 days or longer, you are actually prompting this process in your body called autophagy, which is a process by which when your cells think that it's starving, that food is not present, that it needs to conserve itself, autophagy comes in and actually says, okay, if we don't have enough nutrients to last for a while, we need to make sure that the cells and the information that we have currently working in our body works to the best, most efficient process possible so that we can conserve ourselves as long as we need to. So autophagy is the process by which our cells actually, the old parts of our cells, the damaged parts of our cells get recycled and renewed with newer and younger functioning parts, right? So that, after several days of not eating food, we're suddenly, able to go out and still find the elk and hunt the elk after not eating for 4 days, right? It's an evolutionary process that happens. So we know that fasting is really great for us, but we also know over time that fasting isn't safe for everybody. It's hard to do for long periods of time because autophagy is only activated after avoiding food for 3 days, at least 3 to 5 days is kind of the critical period. Avoiding drinking water for 3 to 5 days, like, whoa, that's hard. That's really hard. And for a lot of people with insulin resistance, with, other conditions, it's really not a safe thing to do. So again, Dr. Walter Longo, who's kind of the theme of today's podcast, he's one of the key researchers he founded and discovered the idea that you can actually mimic a fast because your body will accept a low amount of nutrients in very precise ratios, and we'll get into that in a second, before it triggers those nutrient sensing pathways I brought up earlier in the episode. So when those food activation triggers don't turn on, when they stay off, basically your body doesn't really register the food.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we can stay right below the threshold that your body will say, oh, food is here, we're feeding. If we can stay below that, we can actually mimic a fast while still consuming some food, which is a lot safer for people, easier to do because you still get there's an element of when you do a fast, there's an element of circadian eating. Like when you wake up, there's this habitual, I need to have breakfast or have to that hand to mouth at lunch. This offers that. It offers that circadian eating pattern. It offers, some to make you feel and also feel better because it's easier to have some nutrients every day than just completely avoiding it altogether. So, the fasting mimicking diet, there's a few different versions within my company, Nutra, that exists now, but Prolon is the flagship version 5-day fasting mimicking diet that you can get commercially online. And essentially what happens is you each day is a very unique, comes in its own little box. Every day is precisely designed for that day, depending on what your body is doing. But your body it stays, all the nutrients within each of the days stays below those nutrient sensing pathways. So you still get the benefits, the autophagy benefits, the cellular rejuvenation benefits while still consuming food. And the last thing I'll say about it for now is that it's, in the research also, it shows that there's diminishing returns from the cellular rejuvenation component after 5 days. So we found out that 5 days is like the perfect amount of time. You don't have to do, and you don't have to go crazy and do like a 30-day fast. I've heard people do that. You can't, I mean, sure, do that under medical supervision, but we found that 5 days is the perfect amount. You're still actually reaping the autophagy benefits into day 6 and 7 after you're even done for our program. We've been able to show that too. But that's like the maximum amount of time. And doing that 3 times a year has been shown to reduce your cellular age by 2.5 years. So it helps to support healthy metabolic markers. It helps to support, so many metabolic avenues in our body. And we've had skin health benefits. We've had seen so many really wonderful benefits from the just following the FMD a couple times a year. And that's, if you think about it from a time perspective, we're asking 15 days separated out throughout your year to really harness the benefits of this program.
Wow, that's excellent. I've only done it the one time, so I need to get back and do it some more. So that's amazing. Yes. Well, I didn't understand that what you talked about. I wasn't quite sure what they were doing with the food that you were being given, but now I understand, what you're saying, and understanding is also very critical, right? Understanding what you're doing is critical to doing it. You know what I mean? That, yeah. What I concentrated on was the fact that I wasn't hungry because, yes, I mean, I've tried to, like I said, I've had a lot of people on the show talk about intermittent fasting, and I knew that to get to the 3 days was the threshold. But they're talking about right, drinking water or whatever for 3 days, and some people can do it, but most people can't, and I couldn't.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the best way to go about it because the other component that is important to call out, especially with the with the advent of GLP-1s and the Ozempics and Wegovy's of the world, is that the way that your body breaks down food and the way that our body adapts to the lack of food, you actually are, in most scenarios, are going to lose some muscle mass.
Yes.
So when you just drink water for 3 days, you're absolutely going to be losing some amount of your muscle mass. Same thing with being on GLP-1s, you're going to lose. So it's a conversation about what type of weight you're losing, right? Because you can be down on the scale, but not really down on the scale from having lost the right types of weight. Right. You want to lose fat. You not only want to lose fat, but you also want to lose the visceral fat, the fat that's around your organs, which is known to be the most dangerous in terms of developing chronic diseases. But on the fasting mimicking diet, because of the very precise amount of nutrients that are present, specifically how the amounts of glucose and protein play together, you actually bypass muscle breakdown. So we have, and that's the other thing, we have over 40 clinical trials at this point. So many, a huge portion of them have been able to corroborate time after time that the fat that you're losing is that visceral fat, and you're actually protecting your muscle mass. So following our program, most people do benefit. It is, a low calorie situation for those 5 days. So most people do benefit from a weight loss element, but the fact that you're coming out of it with muscle protected, which is that really metabolically active, lean tissue on our body that makes you feel like you can go and jump and run and move and think.
I love it.
You need that muscle mass, right? So it protects that. And that's very different. I think that's one of if I had to pinpoint, there's so many wonderful things about the FMD. But if I had to pinpoint my favorite part, it's that you're coming out of the program more metabolically active because of that muscle protection than you were when you began.
I love it, because I'm trying to increase my metabolic rate right now. And I told you I have a health coach. He's telling me to do rucking with weights on my back. I think I'll try yours better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, weightlifting is important too. You want to gain muscle here. I mean, it's not.
I actually do have some here still that I purchased that I haven't used. It's in my cupboard, so I'll pull it out.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. You must. You must.
Awesome. All right. So we were talking about health span. That's basically our conversation today. So what are some of the most promising developments in the field of nutritional science related to aging, longevity, and the extended health span?
Yeah, I would say the research around fasting mimicking diets is probably the most profound right now in terms of longevity, and also just the interplay. Kind of going back to our plant-based versus carnivore conversation. There's been some really fascinating research that really does point to the difference, the fact that not all not all nutrients are created the same, even within a particular category of macronutrients, and not all proteins are created the same. Not all carbohydrates are created the same in terms of how they function in the body. We had a study come out that basically IGF-1, when IGF-1, which is one of those nutrient sensing pathways I mentioned earlier, that is triggered primarily with carbohydrate consumption, and eventually it's a secondary mechanism that happens upon protein consumption. When that's excessively triggered, we have seen an acceleration of cellular age. Really quick caveat though, too, because we have some vegans, vegetarians, I'm sure that are listening to your show. And we've been talking so much about like being a well-balanced vegan and vegetarian. If you don't get enough protein too, that can also accelerate aging. So protein isn't about, we're not
muscle, right?
Well, you lose muscle, exactly. And you protein, amino acids are used for literally almost every single process in our body. It's part of our DNA. It's part of the enzymes we need to break down our food. It's part of our neurotransmitter production. It's part of so many, it transports, fat around our body. We need protein for everything. So you need to make sure you're getting enough, but you don't want more than you need, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure that you're staying at this beautiful bottom of the bell curve. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. And that research specifically in how plant-based proteins will make sure that you get some of that IGF-1 that you need to make sure that you're getting can maintaining your muscle mass, getting the really wonderful growth benefits, but that you're staying below the threshold that might prematurely age your cells. So that research is really, really interesting. And I would say that we also did a study looking at the Mediterranean diet and the FMD 1-for-1, specifically 4 cycles of the FMD versus, which would be over 4 months, versus 4 months of continuous Mediterranean diet consumption. And we found that it was equivalent, actually. Mediterranean diet, I'm sure everyone on the show is well aware at this point. The Mediterranean diet's voted year after year the best diet for heart health, for weight loss, for all the things.
It's tell you, yes, the Kirby styling, it's very close to it, right?
Yeah, it's constantly, because of, it's just constantly, proving itself worthy in our conversation. But comparing both of those back to back, they're equivalent. And as it relates to heart health and weight loss, which is really interesting because there's a time difference, right? You don't have to follow the Mediterranean diet 24 hours a day, 7 days of the week. I mean, yes, we would like you to do something along those lines most of the time, but you could technically follow the FMD and have equivalent benefits in terms of heart health and weight loss, and it's a far reduced time commitment, right?
Yeah.
But the benefit too there is that you're still preserving the muscle mass. You do have some muscle loss too from superior. We were superior in that. So it's there's a lot of really interesting data, and I think this conversation's been kind of touching on most of it, that it's about being well balanced. It's about being plant forward most of the time. It's about supplementing with animal proteins if that is what you're interested in doing. But it's man, there's so much. There's so much.
Well, one last question on there, and that's basically just for me. So your program has the top one is the 5-day, but you also have a day one. What is the benefit of doing that?
Yeah. So great question. So the 5-day FMD is considered a prolonged fast. Prolonged fasts are different than intermittent fasts. Intermittent fasts are done, the intermittent fasts are not going to activate autophagy. Okay. Prolonged fast, which lasts longer than 3 days, that's when you're going to start talking about that cellular rejuvenation component that we have been talking on the show. Intermittent fasts are great too, though. They're great for, getting you into ketosis. They're great for, giving your digestive system a break. It's great for weight management. So many reasons why intermittent fasts are great too. But the 1-day reset is a 24-hour, and technically an intermittent fast, that uses that same nutrition technology that we use in the prolonged 5-day, but you can use it as part of a lot of people follow a 5-2 method where they're fasting 2 full days of the week and then eat. That's their diet pattern, is the 5-2. That could fit into a 5-2 method. The 1-day reset's also really wonderful just to kick yourself back into high gear after a vacation. If you've had, after the holidays, if you're not quite, you can't do the prolonged 5-day all the time, right? You don't want, some people have, depending on where you are in your health journey, you might have a year where you do it more often than once a quarter. That's where you'd work with your practitioner, your longevity coach for that. But generally speaking, we recommend doing it 3 times a year. So it's not something that you can just, I need a quick moment to come back into it. It's, you don't want to be fasting that often, to that degree that often. So the 1-day reset, that's where that comes in. It comes in because it's something you can use more regularly. You can use it quickly. It's fast. It's easy. It's, and you don't have the benefit of all of our products is you don't have to guess about anything. We provide you it all. Right. The soups are ready to eat. We give you your meal card. We kind of tell you exactly what you need to do, and it's like the guesswork is out of it. Just grab the box and go, and you don't have to think anything else, right? And that type of convenience is really a lot of our customer base really loves.
Yes, I love it. All right. So, yes, I love this conversation. We covered a lot. So
we sure did. We sure did. Man, I'm thinking back like, wow, we need like a resource document or something to follow up this call. Shoot.
Well, you can send it to me. I'll put it in this.
Oh, I will.
All right. So as we wrap up, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you mentioned that prolonged fasting is just one of your products. Tell us about your products and the Nutra and how they can participate in these programs. right?
Yeah, if you are looking for prevention, for overall wellness, Prolon 5-day and our longevity products would be best for you, and that's you can find those at prolonlife.com, PROLON life.com. If you have a metabolic condition, if you have prediabetes or obesity or diabetes itself, type 2 diabetes, you would be best suited for our medical division, which is lnutrahealth.com, which is l-nutrahealth.com. And those are 360-degree comprehensive programs with our longevity dietitians and our medical staff, and those are really wonderful programs. And then if you're looking to reach me specifically, you can find me on Instagram at Health and Wellness, which is HEALTH, the letter N, and MELLNESS.
All right. That's pretty general.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that helpful? Did you want more?
No. I mean, for your Instagram handle, I mean,
Health and Wellness. Health and Wellness. Yeah. My name is Melanie, so I liked the play on words.
so that's beautiful. It's interesting that you were able to get that handle, health and wellness. That's pretty good.
It's Health and Wellness with an M.
Wellness. Okay. So that's what I'm thinking, health and wellness. All right.
Yeah.
See, I got it wrong.
There you go. There you go. It's like, wait, it's a great handle. It's a play on words. I love it. Yeah, no, it's my name, Melnis, Mellenness.
Okay. All right. That makes a bit more sense. I'm thinking, how did you get health and wellness?
I've been on Instagram since the dawn of time. No, yeah, thank you.
Yes, very good. Well, listen, Melanie. Yes, that was great. This diet conversation, you mentioned a little bit about the GLP-1s and, and how that's helping with the obesity problem in the United States and around the world. But yeah, nutrition is the foundation of our health. I mean, it's everything. There's a time I had a poster on my wall that says you are what you eat. It starts with what you put in your body. Sure. Nutrition and exercise go together, but it's they would say you can sit on a couch and don't move, but if you eat well, you're going to be healthy, right? So you can exercise all you want and putting garbage in, like you. Look, who was I? I was listening to something the other day, and this actually, she's very a big influencer, a pastor, and she was saying that she would go to Orange Theory, which is a very hard workout, and then she would go to the donut place after.
No, don't do that. You're halfway there. You're halfway there. Oh my gosh.
Basically what I'm saying, you can exercise all you want and run and all that and go reward yourself with a whole bunch of junk, and it's not going to do anything. But so
yeah, well, you might have a little bit more leeway to do things like that, but do we suggest it? No. It's definitely still, it's going to add up at some point. It just might not be as fast as some other people.
It's bad. Donuts are terrible.
Right. They're so delicious.
Because I know it's all sugar. I don't even eat them.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing ever. Right. Okay. But yes, I totally enjoyed our conversation today, Melanie. I learned a few things. Like I said, I have tried the fasting Dominican diet. And I would revisit it. Like I said, I think I have the 1-day reset in my closet right now.
Great.
So I will work on that, and then I'll go ahead and get some more of the 5-day. Because autophagy is where we all want to get to, and where I want to get to too.
Yes.
And just in passing, this is really good to cement in that conversation. I have a friend that is she's a registered nurse, and she was working with a client, and the client was in the dying stages. So stop eating. When people are dying, they stop eating. Mm-hmm. And she said that her client went into autophagy, and it extended her life because her cells started rejuvenating, right? So yes, this autophagy is very important, and everybody's talking about it. And it's you need to get to the 3-day, and it's very important that your company is helping out with this critical function.
Yes.
Right.
And I would say last thing I'll say, just to kind of give your readers and listeners a resource. Dr. Walter Longo, all of the proceeds that he sits on our board. He's also our, the El Nutra founder, but all of his proceeds go to his nonprofit, which is called Create Cures. And that he just came out with, I mean, less than 2 weeks ago, just came out with his second book called Fasting Cancer, which is all about the relationship between FMD and cancer and how those two work together and interplay. That would be what you just talked on is exactly what he just did. We don't do that at El Nutra, unfortunately, or we hope to in the future. But if you have anybody interested in learning more about that, the Fasting Cancer book would be a really wonderful read.
Yeah, that is great. Well, I'll put it on a link out in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I'll probably even pick that up because I love knowledge and I love learning.
There's so much to learn.
Yeah, and all these things are good to know. You might come across it personally, or you might be able to help someone with it. And knowledge is always powerful, when you use it, that is. So amazing. All right, guys. Well, listen, I totally enjoyed this conversation. Not only enjoyed it, but I learned a lot, and I hope that you guys learned a lot too. So I will have a summary of my conversation with Melanie on the show page, which is myhelps.us. I will link out to the websites that she mentioned and also connect you to her on Instagram so that you can follow her content. And hey, improve or increase your health span. Because one of the reasons that I am into exercising and into diet and into, all the things, because I want to be able to, my mom is 86 years old and she still walks an hour every day. That's what I want to do.
Hear, hear.
That is my focus. I've had family members that their last 10 years of their life, they're laying in a bed being fed by a tube. Oh my God, kill me now.
Yeah. No.
That is not what I want for me and one for you. So health span is so important. So, grab on to this information and, run with it. So thank you, Melanie, for being on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in. So, before we go, any last words?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for hosting us.
You're very welcome. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks for tuning in. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear your feedback. Also, like and, share this episode and also leave us a review. So thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.